Hello and welcome to Galactic Goddess Podcast and TV. I'm your host, Radanelia, and today we have a very special guest, Miss Abby Wan. She is an amazing woman with an amazing story. She is one of our co-authors in Awakening Starseeds, and her story is out of this world. She has been a powerhouse and in finance, and I would love for you to share with us a little bit about you, Abby.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you for inviting me on the show, and it's an honor. Um, Essentially, in a nutshell, I'm an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist. And several years ago, I was quite successful doing both in Silicon Valley, California. And then part of my job required me to travel around the world a lot, looking at investments and managing them. And I ended up getting adrenal fatigue syndrome from all of the traveling, crossing of the time zones. And that basically triggered a spontaneous Kundalini awakening within me. And that is when I got to find out I'm not just a person or a personality, but actually something much more larger than that. So that was roughly about 15 plus years ago. And that Kundalini awakening led me into a whole spiritual journey where I really found out that before we are, our socially conditioned personality defined by society, before we are our gender, female in my case, we are first and foremost a human being. And as a human being, a member species of this planet, great planet of ours, we have inherent power within us as a natural person. And not only that, our destiny, our purpose, our legacy, that's our birthright. That's our reason for being here. And so the entire process of our journey is learning how to exist and survive on this earth. And then the second half of the journey is accomplishing the mission. For me, I learned how to become a financial person. And then I learned how to be a human being. And now this is the third act. This is where everything comes together and integrate. And so I am on the verge of being able to launch my own mission. This world is helping women entrepreneurs, light workers, spiritually awakened people access their own power, their own prosperity, and fulfill their own missions and projects with the resources and support that is necessary. So not only is this educational, this is also about managing power. And then being able to be supported by those who have power. And in a nutshell, that's kind of my
thing. That's amazing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on? Because it's kind of a big one. And I don't know, maybe you want to save it for next time. But if you feel inclined to, we were talking about it earlier, and you're up to some pretty big things.
Well, the vision, this is all around a vision that when the spontaneous Kundalini erupted within me, within a few days, I saw this vision. And it was me in my office of the future. And I was standing at a table, in front of a table that was in the middle of the room. And it was a topography map of the world, the earth spread out. And it looked like somebody had poked pinholes, had taken a pin and poked holes all over this map. And then a light bulb was positioned underneath it, or a light was underneath the map. So through these holes, you had these pinpricks of light just shining out. And I knew intuitively that to me, I call that the Million Points of Light Initiative. Over the years, it has evolved and it has grown to mean more than just that sight of it. But I knew that with 1 million points of light operating in this world, doing their project to help humanity. And so that has now turned into how can we help our children of the future and our communities of today basically evolve and continue to grow. We live in a world right now that is so fear-driven, so contractive in nature, that it's all we can do, the majority of us, to survive. Well, the reality of that is that that's the wrong direction.
Yeah.
That is devolution. That is preparing to die. When in reality, we as human beings were meant to grow. We were meant to evolve. We were meant to rise, right? We were meant to become cosmic members of the universe.
Yes.
I mean,
come on, guys.
Us around, heading towards the cliff. And know we can fly kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the project has been over 15 plus years in the making.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hoping to be able to bring it out in the next year or two
Mm-hmm.
in a way that can help women.
Mm-hmm.
I chose to help women to counterbalance the power structure that is happening today.
Mm. Wow.
So,
Yeah.
not only that, women are because we are the only gender that can procreate, we have this natural hardwiring in us to take care of children,
Yes.
which is our future,
They
right?
are.
And
Mm-hmm.
that means by extension, we are also hardwired to help our communities because
Mm-hmm.
that is the environment our children will grow up in.
Yeah.
So there's a multiple reasons for why we're throwing our weight behind women, but the fact of the matter is we need to
Mm-hmm.
counterbalance the structuring that's going on today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
That
that's
makes
kind
sense.
of what I'm involved in.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And your background is very intriguing. That you were in finance and all the things that you're doing that not many women probably have been in those situations. So like, how did you get to that point of being a player in that field, and how did you decide to you shifted because of that Kundalini awakening? And I think that's something that a lot of people are going through in various different levels, or certain crisis that causes them to have to shift radically. But you've learned so many skills, through the process, of having that position.
Well, as we said, as we were talking about earlier on, I think many of us who are going through this awakening on a
Mhm.
very personal and intimate level really starts to realize we're not alone.
Mhm.
This is when you become aware that there's something greater out there than yourself, and you're
Mhm.
connected to that because at some point in your life, whether it's caused by a crisis or a trauma, whatever it is, it's a pivotal moment when
Mhm.
your existing life changes and a whole new life begins. And you are just literally picked up from one place that you
Mhm.
knew and are familiar with and dumped in a new place. And now you got to learn how to swim.
Mhm.
For each of us, it's very different. For me, it was very painful.
Mhm.
I was not interested in God at the time,
Mhm.
was not interested in spirituality. I come from the finance industry, and we are called sharks. So
Mhm.
obviously, for me, it was a very different focus.
Mhm.
Um, so when it all happened to me, it was a very painful one and a very resistant one.
Mhm.
So they really knocked me out. I mean, I was bedridden for 2 years, had to learn
Mhm.
to eat all over again, had to learn how to walk. My whole body went through a whole change. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, I wouldn't wish what I went through physically um, for anybody.
Mhm.
But you look back on it now, and not only were you remade,
Mhm.
you were retaught,
Mhm.
you were remembered, and why you came here to be.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that went through this, but at the time I went through it, it was very unique. Uh,
Mhm.
I could not find anybody else who had gone through what I went through.
Mhm.
I couldn't relate to anybody. A lot of what you read out there spiritually just did not connect.
Mhm.
Um, and so, in many cases, you thought you were also going a little bit nuts because you had
Mhm.
no connections. Today, I think there's a lot of women who are finally sharing
Mhm.
their own experiences, and there's enough commonality to be able to say, "Oh, this is what you're going through."
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough when you're doing it all alone. It is those health crises that do stop us in our tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And the universe is like, nope, you're not going to be able to move forward right now. Like, you need to
Pretty much.
stop everything. We're going to reset you from the inside out and activate. And through the process, yeah, like the activations occur. And it does feel like, what is going on? Because it's not relatable as far as the outside world, usually. You know what I mean? Like, the internal processing is so big and transformative that you're like, I'm not even the same person. Like, what in the world is going on here? Am I going to live? Am I going to die? And I can relate to you very much, because when I was very sick, I had to make that thought, like, if I live, what am I going to do? You know, and I was like, I want to be part of this shift. I want to help. I want to take a bigger role. And I'm going to step out of my comfort zone more. You know, I'm going to stand for other people's voices. So, hey, universe, if you if you let me through this, you can count on me. You know.
Yeah, that was the negotiation I was going through.
Yeah, it's like that's how deep it gets. You know, you're having conversations with the divine.
Exactly. No, I have to say, going through it was extremely painful initially. Looking back at it now, I'm extremely
Mm-hmm.
grateful.
Yes. Yes.
Because now the person that I am today versus the person who I was are two
Mm-hmm.
totally different people.
Yeah.
And I
Relatable.
so like the one that I've got now, that I am
Mm-hmm.
today.
That's so funny,
But
but it's so
Ron,
true.
I have to say though that what is the most important thing during that entire process, and which I think that is so important today,
Mm-hmm.
is the concept of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is what dominates the world today.
Very much.
Everywhere you turn and you look around this matrix or this holographic environment that we're in, it's a drumbeat.
Mm-hmm.
And as insidious as it is, it creates decisions, choices, circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
and situations that reinforces that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we had been speaking about earlier, women are trapped in that.
Yeah.
We're enmeshed in it, and we're enmeshed in it so much so that even when we try to break out of that
Mm-hmm.
environment, we find ourselves reinforcing it and coming back into it because it's safer
Mm-hmm.
and familiar, as warped as that sounds.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I feel very personal about, and very, to use your word, ferocious, is the ability to break away the judgment of fear and to reduce it to what it really truly is, which is energy and movement that helps people see things that they normally would not have in a linear environment.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, I wrote a book about
Mm-hmm.
this type of thought process, and about the science that governs this, which is called angular rotation. And the hope is that to be able to teach women, especially, how to be able to recognize and embrace our own differences and uniqueness as a female in conjunction with a male in an environment that is designed for angular rotation, which is linearity plus circumnavigation, rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So when you understand as a female that we do not have to operate like a man
Mm-hmm.
and be linear, but actually embrace the fact that we are female and be rotational,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then all of a sudden our world starts to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of why a lot of women are going through their Kundalini awakenings in such an abrupt way is because we're trying to live in a linear world
Mm-hmm.
to linear rules, to
Yeah.
masculine rules. And
Mm-hmm.
that is so antithesis to who we are as women that we
Yeah.
literally create stress and tension within ourselves.
Yeah.
And how do we resolve that? We get sick,
Yeah.
right? That
Mm-hmm.
force and tension creates that. What
Yeah.
does that mean to us psychologically as well? For some of us women, for me, when I was doing the venture capital thing pre-awakening, you know, I was like the Gloria Steinem in some of the areas that I was working in. And the tremendous amount of stress that was there and the tremendous amount of tension, I had to learn how to be a samurai warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that meant that you had to go for the effective kill.
Mm-hmm.
Since we are the only gender that can procreate, we really stand for life.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine a woman that is trained to kill or to go for the jugular,
Mm-hmm.
and our very innate nature is to protect,
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
nurture.
Yeah.
So think about the stress and the tension that creates within us, right? And the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, from a sense of effectiveness, we're extremely heavy handed.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the world that I was working in, which was very masculine to begin with, the financial world, the saying we used to have within that financial corporate environment was, it's a lot easier to work with a guy than it is to work with a female, because with a woman you have no idea where she's coming from, and she can just literally destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with a man, you could see him coming, and you
Mm-hmm.
knew how to handle it. They were more direct
Mm-hmm.
about that. So
Mm-hmm.
most women or corporate executives in my day, it was, we would rather work with men than we would work with women, because the ability for women to destroy each other
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
a very common experience. And I think you
Mm.
touched upon that as well.
Yeah.
And I have a theory about that.
Mm-hmm.
And my theory is that because we are trained to be men when we are not.
Yeah. Not a good idea.
Not a good idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you really think about that, if you are trained to be the guy,
Mm-hmm.
which is you have to survive and overcome everybody else, there's can only be one at the top.
Yeah.
What do? You kill everybody around you.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't understand what collaborativeness and community is,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whereas with men understand that they could be strong, they could be solitary, they can,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to kill everybody around you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge distinction. Um, so for me, in this project that I'm doing, working with women, we recognize that that is an effect caused by us not truly understanding our own powers and being adaptive to that, but rather that we are being trained incorrectly. And so the premise I'm saying is, what happens if we recognized our own abilities as a female? And I'm not talking about the feminine component of this. I'm talking about the female evolutionary blueprint model of the human being, as to why, as a human being, there is a male and a female, as approached to from the concept of angular rotation, the science of angular rotation. So if you can understand the concept of barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen is a negative connotation in the world we live in today, which is a linear, masculine-oriented, ego-dominated environment, then barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen has a total negative connotation. But if you flip it and you say, okay, from the female perspective, what does barefoot, pregnant, in the kitchen really mean? It's a powerful statement. It's the key to our success. It is the key to our power. It's the key to our evolutionary contribution. So, barefoot, we're connected to the earth.
I'd love to be barefoot, yeah.
It's the power of the earth within us, the ability to connect. Pregnant, we're the only ones who can get pregnant. Our ability to procreate, our abilities to bring in new generations, to evolve, to create the environments, the communal environments, the collaborative environments for that to happen is hardwired within us.
Yes.
We are the gender that ensures evolution, right? We are the gender that ensures grounding, barefoot. We are connected to the simplicity of the earth, the simplicity of endurance, and the simplicity of community. So let's get to the last part, which is in the kitchen. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and it was like, okay, men flip burgers on the grill. We women, we cook stews on the stove. Okay. So in the kitchen is our equivalent to the men's workshop. Our tools are tools of rotational skill. We cook, we measure our ingredients, we bring them all together, we integrate them, we create flavors, we build longevity. You know, I try to do in 2 minutes. You can flip a burger 2 minutes on each side and you've got food. Food takes a heck of a lot longer.
Yeah.
So, you see what I'm saying? It is also where women, when they come together in the kitchen, It is to nurture. It is to feed.
Mm-hmm.
It is to
Yeah.
share. It is to create. Nobody rips off another person because of a recipe, you
Mm-hmm.
know? It is how do you come together? So, barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen, to me, is a rally cry for our own feminine power, our own
Mm-hmm.
female prowess. And then let's take it another step further, prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you are fearful that as a female you are afraid of numbers and that the man should take care of you and you step away from that power, here's something that is really bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Power in this world is money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not embrace your power as a female and then embrace your power in society by understanding money and knowing how to use money, then you give up your power.
Mm-hmm.
Real simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what is exciting about today is that women, especially in my generation, we have gone to the point where we've done enough,
Mm-hmm.
that we've earned enough, so that we can do enough with our own power.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women in their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s, we're rebirthing. We're choosing to vote
Mm.
with money.
Yeah, that's huge.
Isn't that huge?
It's everything.
So we are giving up the whole concept of fear and being the little woman, and we are
Mm-hmm.
saying it's time. So I kind of forgot where we were going with this, except for the fact that I think it's time
It's
for us.
time.
It's time. You
It's
know?
time. That's what it's all about. It's time. Well, you were speaking about embracing your strength as a woman and our innate ability to nurture, to be the groundedness, to really, part of our gifts is to be the feminine nurturer, and to try to go, the male model is to go against the grain of who we are at the very core essence of our being. So we need to start to honor our true nature, I think is what you're trying to say. And also come together in camaraderie and realize, hey, it's not a threat. If you're successful, I can be successful too. It's not one or the other. That in fact, we can actually come together and build together. Like we can be stronger together. Community is important, creating community. And it goes so well with the project that you're creating, because it's going to touch people's lives all over the world, you know?
It is. A big part of it is understanding project management, but it's also knowing yourself. It's the concept of
Mm-hmm.
if you can illuminate your life, you can impact your world.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
big part of impacting your world is understanding how money works and how power works with that. So here's something we do so well, Rada. I'm going to give you the secret to the
Okay.
whole thing. Okay,
All right.
we
All
do
right.
so incredibly well, and we don't realize that that is the fundamentals secret to growing money. You asked me earlier about wealth management.
Mm-hmm.
And when most people get introduced to wealth management, they're introduced to equations, they're introduced to, you know, numbers, they're introduced to just when you look at it, it just looks so intimidating. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let me just, if your listeners take this one piece away. When you go in a kitchen and you look at a recipe and you start to work with the recipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You measure it,
Mm-hmm.
right? You use ratios. A cup of
Mm-hmm.
this, a spoonful, tablespoon of this, a teaspoon of that. And then you taste, you add different
Mm-hmm.
things, everything. And then you do it at different times, right? You don't put
Mm-hmm.
it all in at one shot because everything has its own maturing
Mm-hmm.
and aging stage before you build it, as you're
Mm-hmm.
building it, okay? The same thing works in wealth management. If you just look at wealth management and your portfolio as a stew,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to break down you start to see the different layers of how you grow your portfolio in the same way that you build a stew.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The most important things about money and wealth management is three things. It's timing, it's ratios, and it's leverage. These are the three most important things that has to do with money and building money. So when you look at leverage, timing, and ratios, and you equate it to numbers and money, it sounds overwhelming. But when you think about it in terms of cooking, it's like, oh yeah, of course.
Right.
Right? Of course. Leverage. Well, if I put this in, it enhances this flavor even more. It makes this taste even better. Ratio. That's the measurements that you got to put in for the whole thing to start to work together. Timing. What's the order it has to come in? You don't put this in before that. You put this in much later when this has finally reached its own maturization. And all of a sudden, when you start to speak in the language that we as females are familiar with, what is unknown, obscure, and difficult to understand becomes easy and acceptable and normal. It just becomes incredibly familiar to us. So part of our project is to really help women understand the financial world in a way that they can relate to. Because if you can relate to it, it's intimidating and scary. But if you can relate to it, it's simple.
Yeah, I like the way you use the I mean, disclaimer, I'm not the greatest chef, but I mean, I'm more like, let's create some salads and some healthy wraps, more, or smoothies,
Exactly. But you use the same three things.
Yeah.
You still use the same three things. Leverage is spicing it up, making it, I mean, if you want to eat healthy, you're very particular about what you're going to put in your salad. You're looking for optimum health. Well, that's leveraging.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, optimum health, if you put the word financial in the middle of that, it's the same meaning.
I love that. I love how easy you make it, and I think this is really the time to help educate women and to bring them together in this fashion, because the finances affect everything from politics too. And, we won't go there, but I'm just saying, you have to sort of have a certain amount of campaign funding for anything, or anything that you want to do that's going to create visibility. You're going to need funding, and so if you want to create a film, whatever it is, it's important work that you're doing. I love how the universe brings everything full circle, because at the time of crisis, no one thinks, oh, this is for my favor. This is for my highest and best good. Like, we're like, why me? Why? What did I do? Like, how did I get kicked out of this game? But really, because you're supposed to be playing a different game altogether. And that's part of evolution too, is we are recreating the game as we go, but it's got to be us recreating the rules too,
Well, it's if you're going to change games, you got to adapt to the new rules. And I think this time, but then again, like I used to say when I was younger, trying to fight in the schools in California, local gets trumped by national, right? National gets trumped by international. Diplomatic Corps beats everything. And so if you look at it that way, if you access everything from the perspective and from the power of a human being versus your role in society or your gender, you trump it all, because you get to access all the power from both the earth, from the higher dimensions, from all the combined genders, from your blueprint, from the energetic fields. If you play the game that a human being is meant to play, you trump it all.
That's beautiful. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot there. And what is your book called? How Me Found I?
My book is called How Me Found I, Mastering the Art of Pivoting Gracefully Through Life. And it's if me was the socially conditioned personality and I was all that you are, so to some people it's spirit, soul, etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is, it is that part of you that is part of the oneness of it all. So it knows a whole lot more than the personality.
Yeah.
And when you get connected together, you start to realize that the way you move through life because the only constant in the world is change,
Mm-hmm.
is you have to learn how to move in that context.
Mm-hmm.
And we move through life evolutionarily through pivoting. We don't go in a straight line. The linear concept of movement is an ego minded function. The heart adds in the concept of rotation. So, what is pivoting? Pivoting is a step forward linearly while you're being turned by the universe. That's called being in sync and being in flow. We don't know that. So, we try to advance through life linearly and we run into walls constantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
If you go to my website, which is mydiamondquest.net or abigaildswan.net or .com, you'll see on the homepage an article that was written for Common Ground magazine that talks about navigating change, the art of the soft pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, that helps you understand how to transition from one state to another.
Wow, it's amazing. I cannot wait to read your book. And I'm just blown away and honored to have you in Awakening Starseeds. Your chapter is so powerful and so moving. We really saved the best for last. So you have the last chapter. So to just go out with a bang, and when people read the book, they're gonna be like, "Whoa!" You know? And I love that. I mean, I'm just so pleased that you're part of it. It's a beautiful story, and I think we can find so much in each other's stories.
Yeah.
I think we can find so much relatedness, understanding, realizing many of us have crossed the same bridges. We just maybe called it something different, or we didn't even know. And that's the beauty of sharing, of being generous enough to share and to write. I would love to ask you, how did you find the courage to write your first book, and then also even to come into this book? A lot of times it can be very intimidating, and I always said with Awakening Starseeds, you guys have to be honest, authentic, and if it's not, we're gonna have to put it back and see what happens. So you stepped right into it, and you just wrote your chapter in no time, and it's phenomenal. Like, where did you get that courage and inspiration?
I have to say I kind of cheat. Let's just call it that.
Mm-hmm.
I think these several years since my Kundalini awakening was really learning how to move in alignment with my higher self,
Mm-hmm.
and to learn how to step out of your own way so that information can download and flow
Mm-hmm.
through you. That's been a lot of the training.
Mm-hmm.
And so both the book and the chapter are like that. I have learned how to step out of my own way, especially when it comes to deadlines. How you used to agonize over deadlines and everything, and what you
Yeah.
need to do, how perfect it is, and all that.
Yeah.
Well, that's ego's way of doing things. My
Mm-hmm.
way of doing things is knowing that when it appears, whatever needs to happen at that particular time will happen perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I just need to not even worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the book announced itself and got written in 3 months by waking me up every morning at 2 a.m. I put my fingers on the keyboard and it just wrote itself.
Mm.
I mean, no kidding, it did. It wrote itself. It told me where to put the paragraphs, when the chapters needed to be fixed. Needed to be, where it needed to be insertions, etc. I did not read the manuscript in full until it was fully done 3 months later on an airplane, and couldn't believe I wrote it. And
I love that.
I wrote it. I think that my higher guides wrote it. I was just the instrument. So I've learned to trust now,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big deal for me.
Mm.
I've learned to trust that whatever is meant to be shared and is meant to be out there is there, will show up correctly at the right time, saying the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Where I get into my own way is when I worry about whether or not I'm going to be, as they say, coming out of the spiritual cave. Will it be accepted because I am who I am?
Mm-hmm.
We still have those types of hesitancies about coming out fully and authentically,
Mm-hmm.
and whether it's going to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever that happens, I tend to go out and just read a book or something and just get out of my own way.
Amazing. And
So
you just jumped right into this. Go ahead, please.
No. I'm happy to be part of your book and be the punctuation point at the end of a long
I
sentence.
know. It's good. It's so great. It's just, it's beautiful how it's all flows so nicely together. And then your story, and it's just like, okay, there you go, folks. It's an incredible book. I'm very proud of it, and I know you'll be proud of it. And our whole point was to share this across the globe so that other people going through awakenings or different experiences know they're not alone. Like I think part of that is a compassion of, like you said, going through it on your own, which I also did, and realizing that, it's nice to have information out there. It's nice to have, there's a lot more information coming forth. I mean, that is one thing in the information age. We do have more access, but even a few years ago, I mean, there wasn't as much as there is now, but this is sort of taking it to a very different level, elevating it to people's personal stories so that people can flip through the book, and any chapter they'll find something relatable. They'll know they're not alone. They know they can come out of this, that like the dark night of the soul is here to serve, not to make you drown. That eventually, if you go through the whole process the way it's meant to be, instead of trying to find the shortcuts, you get the gift, which you've gotten the gift. You got the gift, you got the download, you got the information. Your mission is downloaded to you. And that is important. That is such a gift, because we were here to remember our mission, and we go through life trying to figure out how to do the linear thing, and at some point we have to say, wait a minute, there's more. Like you said, just like you said, there's more.
There's totally more. It's like, when we're learning how to fit in our own shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not slipping and sliding because the shoe is too big. Now the shoes work,
Mm-hmm.
So it's been an interesting journey, and I know there's a lot more to come.
It's so exciting. I can't wait to meet you and to eventually come to your event. It's going to be wonderful. So thank you so much, Abby. I'm putting your information below so people can find you, contact you, find out about what you're creating and what you're up to, and as well as your book. So you guys can get her book below. But Awakening Starseeds is out now for pre-sale, and then it's going to go up in June, and it's going to be an amazing party across the globe, because we have global authors. So we're going to celebrate in each one of our places, and so happy to have your incredible voice and your power and prosperity energy as a bang to the end. So thank you so much, Abby, and I hope we can talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rana. I'm looking forward to the book.
Have a beautiful day, guys. Bye-bye.